Let's get to it. Tucker Carlson is a political commentator, author who hosted the nightly political talk show Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News from 2016 to 2023. He has also previously hosted programs on CNN and MSNBC. In 2010, Carlson co-founded and served as editor-in-chief of the news and opinion website The Daily Caller. Departing in 2020, he's written 3 books. I've read 3 books. He's written 3 books: Politicians, Partisans, and Parasites, Ships of Fools, and The Long Slide. And just this week, Tucker Carlson launched a new media company, Tucker Carlson Network, a subscription streaming service. And here's the announcement.
They told you the guys torching Wendy's in 2020 were mostly peaceful. They said that masks worked. They told you the vax was safe. They tried to convince you that Russia blew up its own pipeline. The corporate media lied too much, and it killed them. We're driving to see Julian Assange.
Believe me when I tell you.
Wait. I should be boycotting Bud Light.
Fantastic job.
Thank you. That was amazing.
So let's welcome Tucker Carlson and the new Tucker Carlson Network. Hey, Tucker, thanks for coming on, pal.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell people about this new network. What should they know about it?
I mean, I just spent, 14 years. Well, I spent like over 25 years working for big media companies. And I was just reminded yet again that when you work for other people, things might be going fine and you're happy, but ultimately you're not in control. And you can't actually say everything that you want to say because there are always limits when someone else is in charge. And so if you want to keep saying what you want to say, which is my primary goal in life, and I mean that, anyone knows me can tell you that's true, more than money or anything else, I want to say what I want to say. You kind of have to be immune from pressure from companies or from advertisers, and you kind of have to go subscription. At least that's the conclusion that I have reached, especially going into the next 12 months, which I think are going to be pretty intense. So very intense. So I just wanted a fortress behind which I could say whatever I want. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's what we're trying to build.
Well, it's exciting. I'm here on YouTube where I don't have any controls on what I say, except Bill Gates gets to dictate what I say about COVID and what I say about health. And people don't understand how he has control. A billionaire like Bill, he doesn't own Google or YouTube. A
simple farmer.
How he's a simple farmer. How does he have control over what I get to say? Well, because he's the biggest donor to the WHO, and Google and YouTube have a policy that I can't contradict anything the WHO says. And so as the biggest donor to the WHO, because he contributes through his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and through Gavi, another vaccine company that organization he started, and they donate just as much to the WHO, if not more, than even China. So they're like the number one donor. And the former head of the WHO has admitted that when they have to go around begging for donations so they can run their organization. And then when someone gives them a big donation, they have to do what they say. That's not me saying that. That's the former head of the WHO. So I'm controlled by what I can say here about COVID, vaccines, health policy in general, the next pandemic, the last pandemic. I'm controlled by Bill Gates himself. And Bill Gates, as we know, funds those fake fact-checking organizations that fact-check me on Facebook. And they always say that it's not, I'm spreading misinformation, but I've never had misinformation in anything I've ever shared on Facebook. They're the ones who are the liars. They're the ones who are funded by billionaire class and Bill Gates. And so that's the beauty of what you're doing, is there won't be someone like Bill Gates controlling what you say, or Jeff Bezos, or any other handful, or Klaus Schwab, or the WEF controlling you. So you'll be, and that's what scares them, right? So aren't you afraid that they're going to come for you?
Of course they are. But if you just take 3 steps back, it's sort of remarkable we wound up in a country where billionaires control everything. I mean, I was naive. I assumed, billionaires would be sort of off in their own private world, literally on their private boats with their harems, beating their servants with their canes or whatever, doing whatever they do. But I never imagined a world where they would determine what I was allowed to think about the medicine I take. I mean, that's a level of control enabled only by technology. It's a new thing that has no precedent in human history. I mean, the feudal lord did not exercise that kind of power. I mean, famously, he could sleep with your wife on your wedding night or whatever, but he could not tell you what to think and didn't try. And so this is like a new thing, and everyone should be mad about it. No one's mad about it, weirdly. We lionize these people, but we should be afraid. And yeah, of course they're going to come for me. I mean, but I've been through that before. The best I can do is just the best I can do, I guess.
And so they did already come for you one time. You were the #1 rated news show in America. And I remember when I met you in person at your house in Maine, and we started talking together. It was around the Syrian war, and I was shocked that you were allowed to tell the truth about the Syrian war on television. Let's remember, that's why the Democratic Party and the mainstream media turned on Tulsi Gabbard. They turned on her not because of anything except that she started to tell the truth about the Syrian war. And as soon as she did that, she became persona non grata, and they attacked her. And so when I asked you, I said, well, how are you allowed to tell the truth about the Syrian war? And I don't know if you remember, but you told me it's because you don't have any advertisers. You remember that?
Right. I mean, it's like people, right. They'd already taken them all. Yeah. So there is a lot to be. I mean, everyone talks about fuck you money. You know, yes, fuck you money. No one has fuck you money. There's only fuck you poverty. You're only free when you don't have anything, actually. And in that narrow way, it applied to me because, like, GM was not advertising on my show. It couldn't because all these pressure groups had prevented it. But to Fox's great credit, I had an arrangement for the whole time, the 14 years I was there. And my position was, it's your channel. If you don't like what I'm saying, take me off the air. But as long as I'm on the air, I'm going to say what I want to say. And again, if you don't like it, I'm not going to conform to your views, but you always have the option to take me off, of course. And they exercised that option in the end. But they kind of didn't for the time I was there. And, you know, whatever you think of them, I just have to be honest. And that is true. They let me say it. So good.
So when the pressure groups came for Glenn Beck and they took away his advertising, Fox News got rid of him. But when they took away your advertising, your show was so popular that explain how you still funded that show, how Fox still made money off you.
Well, they made it by the way, I don't really know because I never had any visibility into the numbers at all. Again, this is when you work for someone else, like you don't know what's going on. And there was so much I didn't know. And I wrote my script every night. So I was like completely, I mean, you know what it's like. You're completely in your own head when you're writing something. So I was so cut off. But mostly from subscriptions. I mean, you buy a cable sub and it's X number of dollars per month, and then some percentage of that goes to the different channels. And Fox got the biggest, I think, the biggest cut of any channel. So it was really a pretty good formula, and it's one I'm kind of hoping to replicate. If you have a subscription model, you are to some extent insulated from the stuff. Now you don't control, you know, the very many different layers of the internet between your face and people's phones or televisions, but you can definitely get around the advertiser boycott stuff if you just, you know, have a straightforward arrangement with your audience.
So the ironic thing there is that the pressure groups came for you to take away your advertisers, which they thought would be the end of you. But that was actually the freeing of you. You were unleashed then. And that's why you were allowed to start telling these truths that nobody else has the guts to tell or is allowed to tell on corporate news media. Nobody else, nowhere on CNN, MSNBC, or anywhere else on Fox did anybody tell the truth about the Syrian war. You were the lone guy in mainstream news media telling the truth about the Syrian war. And I can go on and on. You told the truth about Julian Assange. You told the truth about COVID. You told the truth about Ukraine war. You were it was amazing how they allowed you to do that. And now I have my own theory about why they finally shit-canned you. My theory is that you told too much truth, and the last truth you told was when you brought RFK Jr. on to tell the truth about Big Pharma, and that was a bridge too far because RFK Jr. had told me that he was friends with Roger Ailes, by the way. They shared a tent at a kibbutz, which is... And I have a theory about that too. So, but he told me that when he would tell Roger Ailes all the stuff that he had learned about vaccines, Roger Ailes said, "This is all great information, and I'm glad you're sharing it with me. But if I let you on my news station to say that, I would get a phone call and I would be fired." And so that's why he couldn't let him on. But you brought him on, and it seemed like within a week after you had brought him on, they had gotten rid of you. So does that what's your theory?
Well, I really don't. I mean, I honestly don't know. And it is one of those, those mysteries where there's so many possible suspects that it's kind of hard to pick. I know the Ukraine thing didn't sit well with really anybody in Washington or New York. And by the way, maybe sometime before I die, I'll learn why they were so obsessed with Ukraine. It's not as simple as they were all making money, because they weren't all making money on it. There's something deeper that I honestly don't get, but it was absolutely real. And I lost friends over it, and someone I really liked. We didn't agree on everything, but I really liked him. Would not talk to me because of the Ukraine thing. So the level of hysteria around Ukraine was very intense. Obviously,
was his name?
No, it was someone. It's a well-known person who's really a good guy, and he won't talk to me. And ran into my wife recently. I'm very mad at your husband, and she said, "I've known this guy for many years. This television person. What? Why are you mad at my husband? Over Ukraine?" And my wife's like, "Why are you mad about Ukraine?" What? It's not political. She's completely confused. Like, why would that be a personal dispute or something? Do you know what I mean? It was like I attacked one of his kids. But the pharma thing, just to be clear, I know you know this and say this all the time, I'm sure, but they buy more advertising than any industry, not to sell the products that they make, but to control the coverage of those products. That's obviously the point, right? So, yeah, that's a tough thing. And I think Bobby was fundamentally right about that, clearly, about the vax. And, there's no doubt nobody liked it. It's one thing to be like, oh, masks don't work. And I know nothing about vaccines or medicine or science at all. And I never claimed that I did. But my spidey senses went crazy with this vax. I was like, what is this? It's weird. And I don't want to take it personally. And I didn't. And I think people should have a choice not to take it. That instinct turned out to be vindicated. But the second I articulated that in the mildest way, like, hey, we've never had any successful vaccine for a coronavirus, so let's slow down a little bit. Holy smokes. I mean, they went crazy. Everybody, not just the channel, but everywhere. And that, by the way, absolutely solidified my instinct. I'm not taking this crap, and no one in my family's taking this crap. But I never really figured out what that was about. I do think it's more than about advertisers like Ukraine. Like, there's some weird hive mind command that's going out and convincing the people with the most power in our society, must get on board with whatever destructive nonsense someone's cooked up. Like, I don't have a good theory. Do you?
Let me just I have to, because Bill Gates controls me, let's remind people that the vaccine is safe and effective, and it won't stop the spread or contraction of the virus, but it will keep you from getting seriously ill, hospitalized, or dead. So
slows it right down.
Kurt and I, we eat 4 or 5 boosters for breakfast. Yeah. And so, Kurt, did you want to have something to say? So I'm here with the great Kurt Metzger, by the way, Emmy Award-winning comedy writer.
Hey, Kurt.
Hey, man. A point for it's Pfizer. Remember James O'Keefe and Project Veritas? That's right. All of a sudden, he's out of his own thing.
They kicked him out of
the best video he ever did.
The best news report he ever did, or maybe the best news report of the year. Yeah. That he got fired for that from his own company because of the power of big pharma. Now, I lost lots and lots of friends. People who worked for me, people who wrote for me, people screamed at me on the phone, telling me I shouldn't talk about COVID and I shouldn't talk about the vaccine. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to tell people when I find out that they're being lied to about this? And I was told, you should tell them to talk to a doctor. I'm like, well, I'm bringing doctors on my show. And then they told me, well, you should bring out a mainstream doctor. I should bring out a mainstream doctor. They can get that anywhere else. That's not what this show's about. This show's about bringing you an alternative. It's all called an alternative news show. It's not called a mainstream news show. So I'm not going to bring on Dr. Fauci on my show, although I'd love to. He would never come on my show.
They weren't mainstream. They were mainstream doctors.
Of course, the doctors that I did bring on were actually mainstream doctors. Dr. Robert Malone, who I brought on, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Pierre Corey. These are all mainstream doctors. Some of the most cited, most well-researched, the greatest doctors in their field up until COVID. And then, of course, they had to be discredited by the Atlantic and New York Times and Jeff Bezos and MSNBC and everybody else because they had a narrative that was counter to what happened to COVID. So, I've experienced that myself. People lost their mind. There are most of the people in Hollywood that are my old friends. They won't come near me. It's like if I go into a comedy club, I'm Florida and they are Alaska. They stay as far away from me as they possibly can. Not all of them, but most of them. So did you
No.
Okay. So I certainly have experienced that. And I think really that is what happened to you. And you know what's funny about all the RFK Jr. propaganda that they've given him. By the way, the guy was a hero to environmentalists, and even environmentalists hate him now. They all turned their backs on him. People who are environmentalists don't want anything to do with him because he found out something about the vaccines and how they get approved and what's really in them that he had to share with people because he couldn't keep that truth inside of him, and he shared it. And so now he's persona non grata. It's amazing what they've done to him. But if you notice, his favorability ratings is higher than both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Isn't that amazing?
I have noticed. But it's. I think what's so interesting is that doctors who clearly can read, I mean, they're literate by definition. They're not stupid by definition, you hope. But I think it's true. They're smart. They look at the evidence and like everything they said was fundamentally everything they said was wrong about the vax. And it's hurt a lot of people. And like, where are all the, and some doctors, I know the three that you mentioned, and they're great, but there are tens of thousands of doctors in the United States. And why aren't they all standing up and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I cannot believe I recommended it. I mean, I endorsed the Iraq war in 2003. And at the end of 2003, I realized I was wrong. And I felt bad about it for 20 years. 20 years. In fact, it was 20 years ago this week that I went to Iraq. And I felt bad about it ever since then. And at every opportunity, I apologize, not to please other people, but to maintain my dignity, my self-respect. I mean, that's a prerequisite. You have to, if you hurt someone unintentionally, you have to say, I'm sorry. And I can't believe that 99% of American doctors won't do that. And I'm not going to them, by the way. I would never go to a doctor who was still lying about COVID because that's a dangerous person. That's an immoral person and a dangerous person.
My own personal doctor, who I won't name because she's already been attacked, was the one who pushed back. She treated me when I was vaccine injured. I called her, yes, and I was afraid that she wasn't going to believe me. She said, Jimmy, I'm treating 5 people just like you. 3 of them are nurses, 2 of them are doctors, and none of them feel comfortable to talk about it. And so she knew really early on that there was something nefarious going on. She was the one, they told her they wouldn't let her treat patients. They would, when they would come in for COVID, they would just tell her to intubate them. And she was like, everybody's dying. So she started giving them steroids. And they came to her and said, hey, you're breaking the rules. You're not allowed to give people steroids. And she said, yeah, but my patients are living and your patients are dying. And then 6 months later, the FDA and the CDC reversed their advice on that and said, okay, you can give them steroids. And so I was very, very lucky to have my own personal doctor be on the forefront of that. And so I trust her more than anything. Now, I want to go back.
What a blessing. I mean, yes.
Go ahead. What
a blessing. No, you're just so fortunate to have someone with deep medical knowledge who is a decent human being and not insane. And, most people, including me, do not have access to a doctor like that. And I've met doctors I like, and I'm sure they're competent in their specialties, but I can't get past it. It's like, I'm great at my job. I killed a bunch of people, but I'm a great person. It's like, no, it's too big. It's too big a sin to overlook. Like, you have no credibility unless you apologize for that and explain how you reached that wrong conclusion. That's like, anyway, I can't get past it.
When I got vaccine injured, I was 4 or 5 weeks after my second dose. And I bought the propaganda like everybody else. I didn't have my spidey senses like you because I have a bone disease, and I was convinced that they told you that when you get if you get COVID, it's going to go right to your weakest organ and kill you. And so I knew I was in bad shape with my bone disease, and I was afraid it was going to go to my bones and kill me. And so I was the first one in line to get that vaccine. And so 4 or 5 weeks after my second dose, I was still sick as a dog with headaches and I had a stiff neck. I had exhaustion all day. My joints ached. I had fevers. I didn't know what to do. So I tweeted about it, and I said, is there anybody else having these symptoms? And luckily, there's a doctor named Dr. Uganda who was he was starting a study to try to treat people like me. And he said he was also trying to come up with a protocol to treat people with long COVID. And his theory was that people with long COVID would present the same way with people who were vaccine injured. And he showed me biologically that I did present. He goes, "You've never had COVID, but it looks like because of these tests we ran, your biological markers look as if you have long COVID, but you don't because you never had COVID." So he's like, so whatever your symptoms are, it had to come from the vaccine. So then he got me on. He was the one who told me that they were lying about ivermectin. He was the one who told me that ivermectin was considered a miracle drug before COVID. They were even looking to ivermectin to cure cancer before COVID. And I looked it up, and that's true. And so they always knew that it was a great drug, but of course nobody could make money off it. And if it actually did treat COVID, they couldn't get their emergency medical use authorization for their vaccines. So we've been lied to about. So that, I just want to say thanks to Dr. Yogande. He was the first one who helped me, and then he said you better get your personal doctor on board, and then she was. So I was taken care of in that way, and now I have Dr. Pierre Corey taking care of me and a few other people. So I am taken care of. But I want to show this clip now because this is of Jon Stewart when he came on your Crossfire show on CNN. I'm going to show he's here giving you a dressing down, but that was back when you were in the employ of the problem rather than the solution. And Jon Stewart was, as of yet, relatively uncorrupted by the gaping maw that eats every other political voice in the network structure and shits out a yes man on the other end. So let's watch this real briefly.
You have a responsibility to the public discourse, and you fail miserably.
School, I think.
You need to go to one. The thing that I want to say is, when you have people on for just knee-jerk, reactionary talk.
Wait, I thought you were going to be funny. Come on, be funny.
No, I'm not going to be your monkey. Go ahead. I watch your show every day, and it kills me.
I can tell you love it.
It's so painful to watch. Because we need what you do. This is such a great opportunity you have here to actually get politicians off of their marketing and strategy. Yeah, it's someone who watches your show and cannot take it anymore. I just can't.
What's it like to have dinner with you? It must be excruciating. Do you lecture people like this, or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them, and they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities?
If I think they are.
Look, I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't. But the thing I want to get to...
We did promise naked pictures of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we did. No. Let's get to those.
Why can't we just talk, please? I beg of you guys.
I think you watch too much Crossfire. We're going to take a quick break.
No.
Look, hold on. We've got commercials.
Please.
Next,
please stop.
In the rapid fire.
Please
Hopefully
stop.
He'll be here. We hope.
So that was. Go ahead, Kurt.
Do you know what I realized what John was arguing against? Because I remember when that came out. What he's arguing against is no, it's not productive because you guys aren't you shouldn't be arguing at all. We should all just be united saying the handed propaganda without even the illusion of an argument.
That's right. So what happened to you? You went from there. You made atonement for the Iraq war, and then they took your advertisers away, and you started to tell the truth about everything: the Syrian war, Ukraine war, COVID, vaccines, everything. You started to be the only person in news to tell the truth about the biggest stories of our time. And Jon Stewart went on to hang a medal on a Nazi at Disney World in service of the war machine. And he'll never apologize for it, and he'll never even acknowledge that he did it. Just go, "Hey, I got tricked." Or something. So he won't even say that, because he won't tell people the truth about the Ukraine war, because for a second he told the people the truth about where the COVID virus came from, which was a lab in Wuhan. He told the truth on Stephen Colbert's show, and then he was ostracized from polite society for over a year, and it damaged him. It damaged him so much that he was willing to hang a medal on a Nazi at Disney World.
The guy covered it up though. He didn't know until after.
There it is.
See, he put a red thing on it.
And then he had to go give a tongue bath to two of the most bloodthirsty warmongers in the history of our country, Hillary Clinton and Condi Rice. And then when he did cover COVID and the vaccine, he didn't bring on Dr. Robert Malone or McCullough or Pierre Corey or anybody who had a counter narrative to the establishment lies. He brought on three liars for the establishment and pretended like he was so he did propaganda for big pharma and the establishment, not only for wars, he's doing it currently, and he's not only put for vaccines but for COVID, for everything. And meanwhile, there you are going to visit Julian Assange at Belmarsh And here you are bringing on RFK Jr. to tell the truth about Big Pharma. So what a complete different arc between Jon Stewart and you. He became a yes man to the establishment who's lying to his lying to his audience and afraid to tell the truth. He'll never tell his audience the truth about Ukraine. He'll never tell his audience the truth about COVID or lockdowns or he'll never do that. And he'll never tell where's he on the front lines trying to get Julian Assange out of prison? I don't know. Is he? I don't think so. So I just want to get your reaction to that kind of crazy arc that Jon Stewart had this pompous moral high ground when he came on CNN, and now he's turned into the piece of shit that I make fun of and debunk on a daily basis.
He should wear a bow tie.
So I always thought, well, let me just say it's interesting. I hadn't seen that clip, since it happened, because I never watched clips of myself. So it's been almost 20 years. I should say when that aired, I'd already come out and atoned for supporting the Iraq War. And he had a different view. He's always been a neocon, like always. He's never changed it. He's been consistent on that, I will say. But he looks a little less appealing than I thought. I mean, he was a preachy little phony, really, from the very beginning. He has talent. I always thought he was pretty funny, actually. He's pretty, I'm sure you guys know him well.
He's got a lot of
talent.
He's
fast. So there's that. Yeah, he does. He has talent, for sure. But he was always hollow inside, didn't really believe anything. His beliefs actually just amounted to self-hatred and guilt. That's not a belief system. Those aren't principles. Those are impulses. And so I'm not really surprised that he has become, another Praetorian Guard for the establishment, because that's kind of what he's always been in a way. Like he would do the sort of normal shit they do, like, they love the race stuff. You're a racist. So-and-so's a race. Everything's about race. It's just not that interesting a topic. In my opinion, I've never been very interested in race. It doesn't go anywhere, but he's obsessed with that topic. And in some ways, in retrospect, that's the easiest topic. Everyone's like, oh, it's the hardest topic. No, it's the easiest topic. Because you don't have a conversation. It's just posturing. Nothing ever changes. No one's life is improved. No one actually gets better. No one's improved at all. But the person doing the hectoring gets to feel superior. And that's kind of been his bread and butter for the 25 years. I knew him when he came on. I mean, I'd known him for a while. So for the 25 years I've known him, that's been the sum total of his moral universe. Like, you're a racist, I'm not. And so it's really not surprising that he's wound up sucking up to Condi Rice or, Hillary Clinton or some other totally indefensible warmonger creep. I'm not surprised at all.
You don't think it's useful for him to ask the former first lady such hard-hitting questions like, what's it like to be a powerful woman? You don't think that's very, you don't think that's...
But again, that's, so we're getting back to the race and gender thing. And like, race and gender are real, and there are differences between the races and the genders or whatever, but they're not actually that, it's not that, first of all, it's not that interesting. It's not the most important thing. And it doesn't go anywhere. But that's always where they go. All of these people. They did it with me for years. Once they couldn't cancel my show by pulling the advertising, then I became a white supremacist and a Nazi and a racist. And at some point, I remember thinking to myself in the shower, I don't know, am I a racist? Like, no, I'm not actually. And then I just kind of didn't care after that. But they didn't stop, because that's sort of all they had. They didn't want to actually debate whether the Syrian gas attacks came from Assad or whether they even existed. They did not want to have that conversation. They didn't want to talk about anything of substance at all. They just wanted to dismiss you as crazy or a bigot. And that's the world that Stewart has lived in for the decades I've known him, I will say.
I think his next big move has got to be that he actually becomes a powerful woman. There just aren't any more chess moves left on the board. Am I right?
I'll honor it.
That's so good.
I had this conversation with Cornel West when he came on the show. And when he came on the show, I was a supporter of his. And when he left, I wasn't. And I tried to impress upon him that when he talks about white supremacy, the majority of people in America who are poor are white. And if you're going to try to lecture coal miners about white supremacy, it's going to fall flat. And if he's out there being a black activist, he could talk about white supremacy. But if you're trying to run for president and actually oppose the establishment, the last thing you should do is try to lead with trans issues or LGBTQ, or because you know what? If you get a living wage for everybody, that helps everybody, especially trans and LGBTQ, black and white. If you get health care for everybody, that helps everybody, meaning black and white. So if you start to, what the establishment wants people like Cornel West to do is to keep talking about white supremacy, to keep talking about trans issues, to keep talking about LGBTQ as if they're an oppressed minority like they were in the 90s when I started comedy. Back then, they couldn't get married. They could get fired from their job. They couldn't get housing. That's all over. They have and so to keep pretending like we're living 30 years ago is exactly what the establishment wants to do. And by the way, all this talk about trans issues and talk about white, this doesn't come from the grassroots up. This comes directly from BlackRock and Larry Fink. This comes from Vanguard. This is so the most murderous companies who are raping the planet can shroud themselves in an air of virtue. And how do they do it? They do it by trans issues and LGBTQ and white supremacy and inclusion and equity and all that stuff. And that's there to keep us divided, because the only thing that scares the establishment is when people from the left and the right realize they have more in common that divides us, and they have shared enemy, and that shared enemy is the oligarchy. That's the only thing that scares them. And so if they can keep us talking about race, and if they can keep us talking about gender and ethnicity, that's a gift to them, because it keeps everybody divided. Would you agree with that?
Well, not only would I agree with it vehemently, and that was so nicely explained. I can't really add much to it other than to say there's been research on this. I'm sure you've seen this. The incidence of the phrase racist, white supremacist, white nationalist in the New York Times, which is easily searchable, shot up right after Occupy Wall Street. So I'm not alleging a conspiracy. I think it's a conspiracy of instinct. Like, oh, wait, the one thing you can't criticize is finance. Let's get the peasants mad at each other. There's no question about that. I mean, in my opinion, watching the real crimes are mostly financial. And I'm just amazed. I've lived here for 54 years, and I have never one time on television or any public forum with a big audience heard a real debate about taxes. So we tax people twice as much for working as we do for investing. Why do we do that? I mean, right? So does that mean that investing is twice as virtuous as working? Do we seek to discourage work? I mean, we seek to discourage smoking. That's why we tax cigarettes so heavily. But we tax work at twice the rate of investing. So we're saying investors are twice as good people. They're making twice as important a moral choice as someone who just goes to work every day. Like, that's insane. Why don't we have parity in tax rates? And by the way, maybe there's some like crazy complex economic reason that we don't. I don't know. I'm very open-minded. Maybe if we did that, America would collapse. Why don't you explain it to me? Why don't you explain that to me? Why people are getting taxed at half the rate for investing that I'm paying for working? And no one can. And by the way, well, maybe someone can. No one has, because we've never had that debate. It's more like, oh, trans lives, or some stupid academic bullshit debate about, I don't know what. And none of this stuff is relevant to even to me. And I make a lot more than the average person. You know, what if I made 50 grand a year? This would be a deeply relevant debate. But America has not been treated to that debate because we're arguing about race and endless race stuff. And last point, which is obvious, I'm not sure anybody could find tangible ways in which any Black American or any white American has benefited from the furious debate and chin-tugging and yelling about race over the past 5 years. If you can find one person other than the chicks who run BLM who have all those houses.
Talcum Eggs. You know Talcum Eggs.
Oh, okay.
I love
Sean
him.
White,
No, but I mean, aside from like the obvious charlatans, and I'm sorry, I was going to add one thing because I know Cornel and I've always really liked Cornel. I went to Africa with him 20 years ago with Sharpton and had the best time ever. And I think he's legit smart. I will say that. I mean, he like reads Russian language, which is hard. And he has good instincts, but the fact that his default is always this shallow, you know, effectively neoliberalism, which he would hate it if he heard me say that, but it's true. Why is that? He knows better. He's not dumb. He knows what's happening. And the truth is just to cover. it's his defense mechanism. Like, he doesn't want to, he does kind of want, still an endowed chair at Princeton. So if they come for him at all, he's like, race, trans, whatever. Like, it's purely his force field. That's all it is. That's my opinion.
So
anyway.
So you are correct. I was a big fan of Dr. Cornel West, again, until he came on my show. And then he is really smart. Like you said, he reads Russian, all this stuff. And that's why it was so disappointing when he pretended he was dumber than a pothead jagoff comedian for that entire interview.
Exactly.
He tried to make the case that Donald Trump tried to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th.
Oh, come on.
Which I know he's smarter than. And a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up at the Capitol to try to overthrow the government, and son of a bitch, they all forgot their guns. Isn't that the weirdest thing? Oh my God. It's like, Vinny, you didn't bring the guns? No, I brought the mittens. Anyway, of course, he knows better. And then I tried to point out that, one of his issues is Stop Cop City, people who are protesting the expansion of the police state in Atlanta. And I tried to point out to him that the same RICO laws that, by the way, were invented to go after the mafia, which was why everybody was okay with them. Well, you're only going to use them to go after the mafia. Well, now they're using them to go after Donald Trump, a former president who's a political enemy of the establishment and the number one opponent of the current president, Joe Biden. They used the RICO statute to go after him and indict him. Not only did they use the same RICO statute to go after Stop Cop City protesters, they used the same grand jury. The same grand jury indicted them. And I tried to point that out to Cornel West. And when I said, you see the game that's being played now, he pretended he didn't. And then he called me a Trumper. And so for that, I don't think I can forgive him. And I won't. And I won't stop bringing it up either. Just like I won't stop bringing up John.
That's just but it's so sad, though. It's so sad. I mean, because Cornel, the whole shtick is, I'm a free man. I'm totally, I'm an old blues man. He's always saying that, right? And he could be. He actually could be a free man because he has all the qualities required. He's self-aware. He's smart. He's wildly articulate, and he's a good dude, actually, in my opinion. So why not be? And I think he's had a series of, very complex personal life, and they basically just kind of have him. Like, he needs the gig, and so he has to repeat the slogans.
And that's why
it bums me out every time I see him.
It totally bummed me out. And I tried to impress upon him, why do you call Donald Trump a fascist and you won't call Joe Biden a fascist? And you pretend like fascism only comes when Donald Trump is president. We're living in it. We just lived through 3 years of COVID fascism. You were presented with it, and when presented with it and the chance to fight against it, you turned a blind eye to it on purpose, and that's what he did. And his whole class did that because Cornel West is not from the working class. I'm from the fucking working class, not Cornel West. He's lived in ivory towers his whole goddamn life. I was a bricklayer. I worked in masonry. I drove a forklift. I was in the Teamsters. I've been a fucking stand-up comedian for 30 years. There was nothing more blue collar than banging your head against that comedy wall and entertaining drunks at midnight. I've come from that world, not him. So he lives in ivory towers, and you're always going to be a class loyal, and that's what he was, and that's what he proved to be on my show, and that's what was really disheartening. And he knows he's wrong.
You don't have to be, though. You don't have to be. I will say, as I was hearing about how you grew up, it's like the opposite of how I grew up, and I've kind of reached a lot of the same conclusions that you have, but maybe for different reasons. I just concluded that world is not worth living in. The people aren't that interesting. It's not that great, actually. All the things that people aspire to, when you see it, you're like, it's not that impressive. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be around those people. And so, like, the closer you get, so that's kind of the sad thing. It's like, even if you succeed, if you keep collecting merit badges and wind up wherever you think you want to be on someone's private plane, it's like with Larry Fink, you realize, like, I don't really want to be on a plane with Larry Fink. He's a pig, actually. He's kind of dumb. He's like smart in some specific way that's made him a billionaire, but like, he's not a great person. His wife doesn't respect him, that's for sure, or whatever. Like the familiarity with that world breeds more than contempt. It breeds loathing. At least that's how I feel. Like, I have zero interest in ever being in polite society ever again. And that's as heartfelt a statement as I can make.
I'm right there with you, brother. And I just want to go back to this picture because Obviously Jon Stewart was photoshopped out of that picture, right? There you are.
John had the greatest honor of all,
like
interviewing
Zenobia.
Hillary and Condoleezza.
Exactly.
As you were doing this, he was interviewing the greatest honor of all, interviewing Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice
Together, like...
I mean, I'm sure also on the other side of this car is Ben Stiller and Sean Penn. Am I wrong? I mean, where are those guys? Because they could go show up and give Zelensky his Oscar, who I'm sure he had immediately melted down for the money. But where is Sean Penn? Where is Ben Stiller? Where is Jon Stewart?
Caught, probably.
None of those people are there. Isn't that so? Go ahead, speak to that. To me, that just smacks of the phonies that they are, or are they just that easily controlled?
I think they're to varying degrees. Like, I have so many thoughts about the people, specific people, one of whom I know that you just listed. But I would just say, in general, people have a very strong internal herd instinct, and the desire to belong to a larger group and win the approval of that group is right up there with the sex instinct and the desire for food and water. I mean, it's very basic. And I do think it's like a weird anomaly of birth if you don't have that. I actually don't have that, but most people do. And so I sort of cut them a break a little bit. But in the case of Assange, like if you if you follow that case at all and you sort of push a tiny bit, like, well, okay, what's his crime? He spent 4.5 years in the worst prison in the UK. What has he been charged with in the UK? Nothing. He has not been charged with a crime in Great Britain, period. And so why is he in jail? Well, because the U.S. government is trying to indict him, and the British government has agreed to hold him in a maximum security cell in isolation until that's resolved. Well, like, what is this? And then you find out that before he was charged with any crime in the United States, that Mike Pompeo, who is the director of the CIA, decided to kill him, to assassinate him before he'd been charged with a crime. And then you think to yourself, wait a second. Are federal appointees in my country allowed to use my tax dollars to murder people who embarrass them? I don't think they're allowed to do that. In fact, I think that's a felony. But Mike Pompeo is not in jail. In fact, he's bombing around to the same donors that, they all go to. And not just on the right. But I mean, Nikki Haley's donors, but they're also Chuck Schumer's donors. And those people are all cool with that. That our government, using our money in our name, would murder a guy because he dared to embarrass them by uncovering actual crimes that they committed. And everyone knows this, and no one has a problem with it. And none of that is speculation. It's all been proven. And Mike Pompeo was confronted with the fact that he discussed at CIA as its director murdering Julian Assange. And his response was, anybody who leaked that information is guilty of a crime because you violated our classification laws. Really? What about the guy who was discussing on public property as a public official murdering somebody using federal funds? That's not a crime? Are you freaking kidding? Like, it's too crazy for me. I can't deal with it. So once I started to learn more about that, I was like, I'm just going over there. And I love his wife. Stella is I'm sure you know her, but just really a smart and humane and just decent, good person. And it just bothered me so much that I literally and I didn't have a job. I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything. So it takes 5 hours to get there. I just flew over and went to see him. And it was worse than I imagined.
And, they did the same playbook they did to Julian Assange, they did to Russell Brand, right? So as soon as you start to tell the truth.
Oh, of course. Oh, I noticed.
So they called him a rapist. They said Julian Assange was a rapist. That's the first thing they did. And of course, it took years for that to go away. But now, the lie has power. And so people still think of him as a rapist or a creep or something like that. And and then they did it. You see him do it to Russell Brand. As soon as Russell Brand reached 6 million subscribers on YouTube and was telling the truth about everything, just like you are, they went after him with that same thing. By the way, the stuff that was not new. It wasn't women who came to the police complaining about him or even came to the newspapers complaining about him. It was the newspapers who went and had to fight. They talked to every person in his past and tried to get them to say stuff about him. And then they wrote a sensational hit piece, which is what it was, sensational. And absolutely no charges filed against Russell Brand. There's not nothing.
I know.
And and so somehow immediately YouTube goes, well, we have to take his funding away. And so that's what YouTube did. They tried to take it. They did. They took his advertising away, although I'm sure they still run ads on it, but they just don't give any money to him.
But you know, I went to go see Russell too, who I love and know pretty well, on that same trip because I wanted to see how he was doing. And I was reminded that, by the way, none of the women, assuming they exist, who accused him were named. So media organizations hear an allegation of a crime, but they only name the accused, but not the accuser. So it's like which is totally wrong. I mean, it's completely immoral. You know, you've been accused of robbing a bank. Which bank, you ask? I'm not going to tell you. But you're a bank robber. I mean, it's like, but by the way, this is the playbook. I read this today. I'm writing a piece about Julian Assange, and so in 2017, his real sin was embarrassing the CIA by revealing the existence of the surveillance program that surveilled a bunch of foreign heads of state, et cetera, et cetera. And Assange, by the way, withheld a lot of the information because he asked the CIA, look, I don't want to get anybody killed. So here's what I'm about to put on WikiLeaks. Tell me if any of it is too far. They wouldn't respond. Anyway, but the CIA found the guy they believed leaked that information to WikiLeaks, and they charged him with that crime, imperiling American national security. A jury did not convict him of that. But guess what happened next? He got busted for kiddie porn. Can you believe it? The guy who offended the CIA turned out to be like a huge kiddie porn guy. They found it all in his computer, amazingly. And he's in prison now, and he'll be there for the rest of his life. There isn't a remarkable connection between there's an overlap between the following sets: people who love kiddie porn and people who offend the regime. Have you ever noticed that? It's amazing. And it's enough almost to keep me off the internet at this point. Because I mean, they're not going to get me on, I've been married to the same girl for 30 years. I don't drink. So like, I don't know how they're going to get me. It's not going to be on that stuff. So I'm just not going to my computer. That way they can never say I'm a kiddie porn guy.
Well, they could definitely get me on that stuff. People think that Julian Assange, when I meet what I call shitlibs, my ex friends who are still Democrats, and think that by voting for a Democrat, they pat themselves on the back that they're virtuous and they're somehow fighting white supremacy, Nazism, and fascism, and they're this whole idea. I had a friend say to me, this is a direct quote. Jimmy, I'll go along with a lot of the shit you say, which actually doesn't sound like he would. But he then said, I'm sorry, but January 6th undermined our democracy. And I was like, well, that's adorable. That's what you think did it? You think January 6th is what? You don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. And that was proven over 10 years ago by a Princeton study that what you think and want, no matter how many votes you vote, doesn't have any effect on legislation whatsoever. The only people that affect legislation is the top 10% of the wealthy people in this country, which makes us an oligarchy by definition. Yes. Your government was stolen by corporations probably 50 or 60 years ago, which is why workers haven't had a real raise since 1980. And when are you going to get pissed off about that? The answer is never, because the man on the television didn't tell him to get pissed off about that.
I couldn't agree more. By the way, if they can like kill your president in plain view, and then the lone gunman kills the lone gunman, and then they force you to like believe what is so clearly a lie, and then they attack you as crazy if you question it, and then you go along with it, maybe you're not ready for a democracy. I mean, at some point, people have to say, I'm a free man, I'm a citizen, I pay my taxes, I obey most of your stupid laws, and I kind of demand representation, or I'm going to get very ornery. And you see almost none of that. You don't. So, I don't know. People are free when they demand freedom, and people who don't demand freedom don't get it.
I have to push back a little bit. We said we've never had a real conversation about taxes. We did have a conversation about one tax. And this is, I know, because my brother watches too much cable news. And one day out of nowhere, I'm at his house and he goes, Jimmy, we got to get rid of that estate tax. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he goes, the estate tax, that's, that's when the government takes it. By the way, my brother makes about $50,000 a year, who said this. And he said, that's when if you die and you have millions and millions of dollars, the government just takes half of it. They just take it. I was like, well, that's horrible. Let me know when that becomes a problem and I'll organize a rally. But until then, maybe you should worry about the T-shirt tax at Walmart, because I'm pretty sure estates don't have 2 cars that don't work on the front lawn. So we did have a discussion almost nightly for a few years about the estate tax on network cable news, and that was because they wanted to cut the estate tax, and that's exactly what they did.
But it's kind of been overtaken by events, that debate. It's an interesting debate, and I agree. I would love to hear that debate. Any debate about economics is a good debate as far as I'm concerned. Any debate, and I'm very open-minded, so convince me. But that specific debate is kind of moot now because really rich, if you've got, some family business or whatever, it's a real issue. But if you're a billionaire, it's not an issue at all because you use our nonprofit system to shield your money, right? It's all about foundations, as you noted at the outset. So I'm kind of wondering, what is the point of a, quote, nonprofit? Nonprofits, if you really think about it, NGOs, whatever you call them, kind of define our country. They have more power than the Congress. I'm not sure they're working always for the public good, and they don't have to pay any taxes at all, which makes them twice as powerful as everyone else. So why do we have that system? I don't understand. How about a system where everybody pays the same tax rate, everybody, okay? Keep it low, and rich people can't get out of it. This is just a thought. And if I work at a company, you pay taxes. If I work at a church, I pay taxes. I'm pro-church. I like church, okay? But I don't see why churches shouldn't have to pay taxes. If the people who go to the church support it, that's good, right? They can tithe more. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm totally happy with that. And I just think the nonprofit thing is one of the biggest scams I've ever seen. Why does Harvard have billions and billions and billions of dollars in its endowment and it's still charging $100,000 a year to go there? So who's benefiting from this? It doesn't, not that you'd ever go to Harvard or want to, but and many colleges are this way. Why are they paying no money? I'd love to hear a debate on that.
You drive down Hollywood Boulevard and it's filled with Scientology buildings and some of the most expensive real estate in Los Angeles, and they not have to pay any taxes because L. Ron Hubbard is a nonprofit. So he's a religion. He's a religion somehow.
Yes, and they got that by suborning the IRS commissioner under Bill Clinton. And I'll never forget when that happened. And I ran into that guy at the TSA line in National Airport right after he made that decision to make Scientology a, quote, religion under U.S. tax law. And I did not have the balls to ask him. I stood right next to him in this TSA line. Fred Goldberg, I think his name was. And I want to say, you really gave tax-exempt status to L. Ron Hubbard? But it was one of those great moments in my life that I wasted through cowardice.
AIPAC had not the Jewish lobbying group, but the Pacific lobbying group of Pacific countries economically. So Xi Jinping came to San Francisco a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden, all the homeless people disappeared because Gavin Newsom decided he wanted to clean up San Francisco to impress Xi Jinping, the head of China. So what I've always suspected is that they want this homeless problem to be taking place. They could fix it like that. And that proved it. That proved it, that they could fix it like that. Just a couple years ago in California, Gavin Newsom said that the state of California had a $40 billion surplus. That was a true thing. And so I've known that you could fix homelessness in the entire country for somewhere around $20 to $40 billion. And so why wouldn't he just take a couple of $1 billion and fix homelessness in his own state? And so it seems to me like the WEF and the handful of billionaires who run this country, who also run the global economy. So that's there's a scene from Network, that movie from 1974, where Ned Beatty says there are no countries, there's only companies and the global transfer of dollars. And so we're really living in that. And I think that there's and so the people in Congress and obviously the president they don't run things. They're taking orders. They're taking orders from the donor class, which is a handful of billionaires that run everything. And for some reason, they want to have an open border. They want to have us flooded with immigrants. I know why that is. But they want to keep homelessness. And there's plenty of theories why. One of them is because it's a fentanyl line. They can't go into the homeless encampments. But I think I heard a Scottish I can't think of his name, that we just covered him, Neil Oliver say, it's there to make.
I know Neil Oliver. Yeah,
he's a great guy. He said that it's there to make people who are on edge stay on edge, and so that's why it's in every city, and they can fix it like that, and they won't do it.
Of course.
And what is your theory on why they won't fix the homelessness problem and why they won't give people a living wage and why they won't give people health care like the rest of the goddamn world? What is your theory on this?
Well, I mean, it's the same as all the things that make your life worse. Low-level crime, high-level crime is never punished, as you know. The big financial crimes are never punished. How many people went to prison after the meltdown of 08?
Zero.
I'm just doing the math, right around zero. Right.
Well, they did find a Chinese bank. They did find some Chinese bankers in New York. Remember that? Okay, go ahead.
Exactly, but fine. But the low-level stuff they love because it makes you miserable. It makes you miserable. You expect less. You're off balance. And it's, of course, all together, it amounts to chaos. That's exactly what it is. It's chaos. You feel like things are completely out of control. When you show up, to 7-Eleven and like everything is locked because there's so much shoplifting and you have to step over some passed out guy to get in there and there's a crazy person screaming at you by the cooler. The net effect is to make you feel like, man, this is completely out of control. And I think this is a predicate for a change of government, the form of government. I do think that. The one thing we know they hate is the one thing they claim they love, which is democracy. They hate that. What's democracy? It's the majority kind of gets to decide roughly where we go next. That's the one thing they can't handle because all the decisions are made by such a tiny group. And so they are working as hard as they possibly can to make us dissatisfied with what we have as a first step toward getting us to change it and to be willing to accept a much more authoritarian form of government, which is coming very soon. It's obvious. I don't want that. It's the opposite of what I want. I don't think I'm a conspiracy nut or crazy, but all the evidence kind of points that it's sort of overwhelming. Like, why else would you do this? You don't need to have any of these problems. By the way, you don't even need to go full fascist to end crime. You just need to have laws like, hey, don't steal. Stealing doesn't help anybody. That's bullshit. No poor people benefit from stealing. There are no stores in poor people's areas. You ever been to one? So it's not helping. They're only doing it to hurt. Why are they doing that? Because they plan on making a change in the way that we're governed.
You could order stuff at Amazon, see what a pain it is to go to a store.
So that was the craziest thing.
Well, and there's that.
The craziest thing about COVID, as I picked up on quickly, was that I couldn't go to a local sporting goods store on the corner of my block and buy a catcher's mitt for my nephew for Christmas, but I could order one which only has one person working in it. But I could order one from Amazon, which has thousands of people working inside a giant warehouse.
Exactly.
And that was supposed to be for our safety, which, again, if you just look at it on the face, it doesn't make any logical sense. So you're being lied to, and they're trying to change the economy. And then what happened with the truckers? And by the way, the truckers were vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population. They weren't protesting medicine. They were protesting bullshit authoritarianism, and they were right. And so when I looked at the truckers, I saw white truckers, I saw black truckers, I saw native truckers, I saw Indian truckers with the beard and the thing. And then when I saw that, I was like, white supremacists, a lot of white supremacists. And and then, of course, they called them Nazis, and then they shut down their bank accounts, which was proven to be garbage. But that's what they want. That's why they want to move.
Saluted a Nazi later.
And then they salute. Then they literally they all saluted a Nazi in their parliament, and then they blamed it on Russia. I swear to God, that's what they did. So this digital currency that's coming, right? So they wanted to get you there. Now I go to places, they don't even take cash, which I don't know if you look at the dollar bill, it says this is for all debts, private and public. And if you go to a store, they don't take cash. Yes. That is not a good thing, right?
No, it's a terrifying thing. And look, this is the way, you always imagine when you're a kid and you're reading about the Second World War and the rise of fascism in Europe, you always imagined that it would look like the pictures you saw. There would be guys in tight uniforms goose-stepping through your town. But of course, it's America, so nothing happens that way. Nothing is obvious. Everything is the seduction that you buy into voluntarily because it's easy, it's convenient. And what you don't realize is that you're making a bargain. And for that ease and convenience, you're trading your freedom and your individuality and your privacy and all the things that make you human. And so cash is exactly the same way. It's not like they've banned ATM machines. They're just slowly making it much less common for people to use cash, much less convenient for people to use cash. And in 4 or 5 years, like, no one will use cash. And so at that point, you have, in effect, digital currency. It's just kind of that simple. Because, by the way, MBNA or whoever issues your stupid credit card is every bit as tied in to the permanent bureaucracy in Washington and subject to its demands as any federal agency. So after after January 6th, they immediately got the credit card companies to send them, the FBI, the transaction records of anyone who went to a gun store in, the 15 zip codes around DC for the week preceding and following January 6th. So, and they complied without telling the customer. So they're giving your private information to a law enforcement agency without telling you. Now, that used to be illegal, but the Congress has made it legal, famously after 9/11. And so those are the people who are going to control the currency. I'm not sure the central bank has to issue a digital currency. I don't think it's necessary. You just get the big credit card issuers on board, and all of a sudden they'll just, as they have with dissidents over the past couple of years, no, you can't stay at Airbnb. Sorry. No, you can't transact anything over Venmo. We don't like your politics. I mean, that's where we're going, obviously, at high speed. It's not 10 years, it's like 2 years.
China.
And so what they do, all they have to do, well, thank God for Barack Obama when he signed the NDAA section, I think 1021, where they repealed habeas corpus. So habeas corpus, which means you have a right to a speedy trial, and what all they have to do now is say that you're a terrorist and you don't get a right to a trial. They could give you indefinite detention. Now, let's remember, habeas corpus was in the Magna Carta. So we are operating on a liberty view.
It precedes our country.
Yeah, we're operating on a liberty view somewhere around the 1100s. That's how far back we've gone. And so all they have to do is call you a terrorist. Right. And so, when people were protesting DAPL, they said they were eco terrorists. And so that all they have to do is say you're a terrorist, and they can throw you in jail indefinitely. They can shut down your bank account. They can do anything they want. And then thank God to Barack Obama. And they say Trump is the guy who's the enemy of democracy. That somehow Trump is the threat. Now, my theory is that why they hate Trump so much. By the way, you're right that they hate democracy. What's the two biggest Democratic actions that have gone against the establishment in the last 10 years? Trump being elected and Brexit. And they hate both those things.
Yeah.
And they can't let people have democracy. So they do it's such a great story. You accuse your enemy of the thing you're doing. Trump is going to take away your democracy. No, you're the one taking away my democracy. Trump is going to prosecute journalists. No, you're the one who's trying to kill Julian Assange. Barack Obama was the one who used the Espionage Act more than all the presidents preceded him to prosecute journalists. It was Barack Obama who did that. It wasn't Trump. All right. So the exact opposite is happening. And people, go ahead, Kurt, you want to say something?
Trump and Brexit, that was like their citizens voting for Hamas in their eyes.
That's right.
Like us in 2006.
That's right.
We gave you a vote and you voted Hamas.
You voted wrong. So my theory on why they hate Trump is twofold. Because they all love Trump, right? My whole life, he was invited on every late night talk show. He was on the cover of every magazine. They gave him his own television show for 10 years. They gave him Emmy nominations. Every star from Hollywood came and bent the knee and called him Mr. Trump. They all golf together. Their kids are all best friends. They all go to each other's third and fourth weddings. They all got on jets and fuck kids together on Jeffrey Epstein's island. So why do they hate Trump now? Why? And my theory is they hate Trump now was because he ran on an anti-interventionist platform and won, and then actually was an anti-interventionist. He is the only president of my lifetime didn't start a war. And then he actually told the truth about our foreign policy. They asked him, why are you leaving troops in Syria? And he said, for the oil. And you can't do that because the whole world saw the president of the United States just give the game away of our foreign policy, which has been for the last 50 years, which was we invade smaller countries, we steal their natural resources, and we give it to Western companies. Do you agree that's why they hate Trump?
There's literally no question about it. I watched it happen. I mean, I knew Bill Kristol well. I worked for him for 5 years in the 90s. And I remember very, very well. It was the winter of 2016. Kristol didn't like Trump, but he didn't hate him. And he was writing about it all the time. And maybe there's a way we can work with Trump. Looks like he's going to be the nominee. And, we can do this. And I don't mean to single out Bill Kristol. He's obviously sort of sad old guy at this point, but he kind of represents the mindset of a lot of people in Washington, particularly in the foreign policy world. So that's exactly where he was until the night of the Republican primary debate in, I think it was Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes.
It was in Greenville, South Carolina in 2016. And that's the debate at which Trump said, said to Jeb, like, your brother lied and got us into war. And that war was a disaster, the Iraq War. Well, I'll never forget it as long as I live. And all the morons on TV, political reporting is the easiest kind of reporting, so it tends to draw lower IQ people and much more conventional people. And they're all like, "Oh, that's the end of his campaign." South Carolina has the highest percentage of military veterans of any state, and they're going to hate that. And I remember thinking, I think they'll probably love it. Like the guys whose lives were destroyed by these wars, who didn't see, went on 3 or 4 tours, didn't see their kids get divorced or got injured or killed. Like they know how pointless that was better than anyone else in the country. And of course, that was true. And he won the South Carolina primary. But the takeaway in Washington was this guy must be stopped. That's the red line. And I didn't realize it at the time. I had no idea. I had a lot of theories about what the red line was, but I didn't realize that it was criticizing neocon foreign policy because I thought that foreign policy was completely discredited. I mean, I thought people like Liz Cheney or, all the Paul Wolfowitz, all the people who pushed that nonsense, Victoria Nuland, I thought that they were like in exile. I never imagined they would be back to run everything because their track record was just an unbroken chain of disasters that hurt our country. And I'm just way too literal, I guess. But it turned out not only were they back, they were never not back. They were always in charge. And Trump, that's the thing he did. And they have never forgiven him for it. When he questioned NATO, why do we have NATO? And I thought, man, why do we have NATO? I still don't know the answer. Of course, to cause untold mischief around the world, to degrade our power, drain our treasury, kill people. I mean, NATO is indefensible as currently constituted. But when he said that, then I thought they might assassinate him for saying that. You can't criticize NATO. What if the Soviets invade Germany? It's like so demented.
With cheap gas.
What if they?
with cheap gas and pretty women. Whoa.
I never forget after that debate. I was watching the talking heads afterwards, and Charles Krautheimer said that Trump's campaign is over because you can't go against the Iraq war. And I was like, "Are you nuts? People are cheering in the streets for him saying that." And of course, I mean that's the kind of exactly what you said. I couldn't believe Charles. I'm like, wow, I knew he was a shill for the establishment, but that was like over the top. That was amazing. So now. But
they all believed it. That was the thing. It was so bad.
Yeah. David Frum still goes on Bill Maher and gets quoted by Sam Harris. David Frum.
So let me.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yes. So let me. Bill
Maher quoted Sam Harris.
Yeah, we played a clip of it.
Bill Maher just the other night.
Trump violated norms. Tucker.
There's international norms, Trucker. You can't violate the norms. And and Bill Maher still is under the impression that Ukraine has only lost 70,000 soldiers.
Average age 43. They only had 70,000 young men in the whole country.
That's it.
And they're gone.
So they've lost hundreds of thousands. Why do you think that Germany and Europe has gone along with the Ukraine war? Because now, Germany is paying 4 times the rate for energy than they were before we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Why would their politicians continue to go along with it? Is it because NATO, we have 800 or 900 military bases around the country? We just built 2 inside Syria, 2 military bases inside someone else's country that we're occupying while we're calling Putin a thug. So why do you think Germany and Europe would go along with us screwing them over on their energy?
That's such a great question. I did, because I was unemployed this summer, I went to Europe 6 times this summer and went all around, and everywhere I went, I asked that same question. So NATO blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which was the largest source of cheap energy into the only really important country in Europe, the economic engine of Europe, which is Germany, and wrecked your economy probably for all time. And you don't say anything about it. And why is that? And you can never get a straight answer. It's deeply embarrassing if you bring it up. It's like you're not. And so what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at, Germany's been occupied for 80 years by American troops. And you're looking really at what happens when a country loses a catastrophic war. Same in Japan, by the way. You get this weird conquered peoples syndrome where they turn the rage inward and they hate themselves. The Germans really, really hate themselves. And I think it's evident in their sex lives and their scatological habits, but it's also really evident in the way they conduct their politics. No, I'm dead serious. The problem is that people who really hate themselves are dangerous to you. You're never going to be well treated by a person who hates himself. Yeah. He hates you too. Like, those are the scariest kind of people. So if you're worried about a resurgence of German nationalism, you're worried about the Germans deciding, hey, we've spent centuries killing people, we're going to do it again. Keep this up. That is not healthy in any way. If your so-called ally destroys your country for generations, which is what the Biden administration did when they took out the Nord Stream pipeline, and you don't even feel like you can say anything about it. It's like some dude's in the process of raping your wife, but you're too embarrassed to mention it. That's literally what that is. You're a sick fuck, and you're capable of anything. I mean that.
We have a pact with NATO countries that we're supposed. But we just screwed over all the NATO countries in Europe.
Oh, I know.
I know. We attack them in the most egregious way you can by screwing over their energy. And
also the environment, the largest emission of man-made
methane. And
Thank you.
That came from the environmental president, Joe Biden.
Exactly.
In history, no larger emission.
In history.
Yes.
Now, you took a lot of heat. And I think the reason why you lost a lot of your advertisers, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is because of what you would say about the border and what you said about immigration, correct? Would you agree with that, or am I wrong?
That's where they first hit me, that I was racist for saying that the U.S. government exists to serve the interests of Americans, and that I've never been against immigration. I'm not against immigration now. But, uncontrolled immigration makes your country worse, and it makes it less tidy, and it makes it dirtier, which I said, and they claim that I called immigrants dirty because I was a Nazi. I don't think immigrants are dirty. I'm not a Nazi. I like virtually every immigrant I've ever met, legal or illegal, but it is a fact when you go, I grew up near the border, so I know if you have chaos anywhere, it's going to be untidy. And I believe in a country that is tidy, which means that even if you don't have a lot of money, you live in pleasant circumstances. You're not crowded shoulder to shoulder in some crappy, tenement or split level house in the exurbs among garbage. Like, I believe in the dignity of the average person. That's what I was trying to say. And this is not conducive to human dignity at all. We're treating these people like animals in the way that we're using them and manipulating them, these foreigners. And we're treating our own population with no respect whatsoever. And anyway, I was a racist for saying that, but I still believe it.
So I have come around on this issue, and I realized that there actually is a game being played. And here is Dick Durbin, and he's going to give the game away. This is about a week or two ago. Yeah. Dick Durbin gave a speech, and it was all about why we need immigration and why we have to take all the people who are here illegally and as quickly as possible turn them into citizens. And he's going to give the game away right here. Here we go. And by the way, he's got all the fire in the belly of Fred Rogers. Here we go. Watch.
We need order at the border. Yes, we need to have changes in the laws that reflect the reality of the overwhelming numbers from all over the world who are coming to our shores and our border. But there is also an incredible demand for legal immigration into this country even now.
Why?
The presiding officer, my colleague from the state of Illinois, has legislation which addresses one aspect of that. Her bill, and I hope I describe it accurately, says that if you're an undocumented person in this country, and you can pass the physical and the required test, background test, the like, you can serve in our military, and if you do it honorably, we will make you citizens of the United States. Do we need that? Do you know what the recruiting numbers are at the Army and the Navy and the Air Force? They can't reach their quotas each month.
So he just so there it is. The reason why our border has about the same level of security as your Facebook page is because we need foreign slaves as conscripts. That's what we do. The Yankees are wising up to the scam of these foreign wars, and what's going to drive people into the shredder? The old standby, desperation.
This is gangs of New York.
So there's people who don't want to join their own military, but they want to go to someone else's country and join their military. That's really what they want. So we need immigrants for our Squid Games. That's what he's saying. Hey, and not just for the military.
And that's the best case scenario. That's the best case. I mean, first of all, they drove a lot of, anyone with self-respect was already driven out of the military by the vax mandates. So the high testosterone population has dropped dramatically in the military, and they do have a massive recruiting problem. Now, I would say the answer is clean up the military, give it missions that the average person can support. People aren't joining the military because they don't support the mission.
That's right.
Right? They don't want to die or send their sons to die for Ukraine. Sorry. But we should consider another possibility here. So if they were about 50 million people without undocumented, illegal, whatever you want to call them, foreign nationals in our country who are not citizens. In a lot of cases, we don't know who they are. So if the majority of the ones who have come in the last 3 years are young military-age men. So if we say, okay, all of a sudden you get to join the military, and our military is populated by people who don't know anything about the United States at all, you have to consider the possibility that the point is not to use them to fight another foreign war, but the point may be to use them domestically. And the U.S. military increasingly, certainly over the last 3 years, but really over the last couple of decades, has been used for domestic purposes, not the National Guards. That's constitutional. The governor calls the Guard out, right? There's a problem. But the standing U.S. military has been used, and its intel services have been used. And that is the case on January 6th, but I think it's the case much more often than that. So if all of a sudden you're saying our military, we should give automatic weapons to people who just got here from foreign countries who we know nothing about at all, and those people can be used to keep order in the United States. I mean, this is literally how Rome fell. I mean, as you may or may not know, literally taking foreigners into the legions, and all of a sudden they're like, well, wait a second, we don't know what this Rome thing is, and we're not into it. And they ended the empire. They ended Rome. So we should be very careful about this because it's at scale, because it's tens of millions of people. It's not like if you're my age, 54, you grew up thinking, well, I have very positive feelings. Again, I grew up near the border of immigrants, like trying hard and it's hard to get here. It's a hassle. You're doing all the shit jobs no one will do. And it's sort of like good people, I would say. But if you import tens of millions of people all at once, you don't know exactly who's there or why they're here, or what is this? You could capsize your country really easily with stuff like this. Last thing I'll say is that Dick Durbin's an evil man. I don't think he's mistaken. I don't think he's misguided. I don't think any of this is an accident. I think he's a servant of evil, and I really mean that.
Tucker, he said he's going to make them cops as well.
Oh, wait, I'll go on. Yeah. Watch this. So he has more to say. So then he goes on. Another reason why. So we have this open border. Here we go.
Find enough people to join our military forces. And there are those who are undocumented who want the chance to serve and risk their lives for this country.
Yeah.
Should we give them the chance? I think we should.
Yeah, so we just need to take away every other avenue and then let them walk up the ramp just like cattle. Sometimes it amazes me how much our culture operates like a factory farm. It really is. I think it's important to know how the sausage is being made, but if they are using us to make the sausages,
let me tell you about the price of college come down then if they're doing this with the recruiting.
Here we go. I know. Here we go. So listen, he's got more to say.
Others that we need. In my state of Illinois, in inner city in Chicago, in the rural areas downstate, we're holding our breath, hoping that we can keep hospitals open. You know why? We don't have enough medical personnel.
What?
And yet there are people all around this world who have medical credentials as doctors and nurses and skilled technicians who want to come to the United States, but we don't give them the chance. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. I think it would make us a better nation and a healthier nation.
So there aren't enough Americans that are going into medical school or nursing schools, Tucker? Did you know that there's empty medical schools all across the country? I didn't know this. Did you know that?
No, I do think we're seeing an actual revolution. I think the immigration thing, it's been so poisoned by the race question, unfortunately, that no one can have a rational conversation about it. But taking away, anything to do with race or national origin, ethnicity, anything, religion, even anything like that, the scale of the change is so profound that nobody can handle it. We're going to wait. And people don't understand. I mean, New York City is our largest city in the United States, biggest city in North America. It's 8 million people. We've imported multiples of that just in the last several years. So we've completely changed the country in ways that are not yet visible, but are about to be. And one of the many effects of this is that the people who are born here get kind of crowded out. And I mean, there are tons of people sitting at home who were driven out of the workforce for a bunch of different reasons over the past 4 years, and they're languishing and dying, and nobody cares at all about them. And so leaving aside even the moral calculations there, just to return to first principles, the only job of the U.S. government is to take care of Americans. We pay for it. We vote for it. It's ours. It's our country. So if they stop doing that, then they are, I think, ripe for a revolution, hopefully a nonviolent one, but definitely a revolution of some kind, because that's completely not the purpose of a representative democracy. I mean, it has to serve the people, and the people are last in line for, in every consideration that the government makes. And Dick Durbin and people like him are leading that. And I don't know. It's making me radical. I'm being honest with you.
It's making me radical also. I'm certainly going to be called.
He does have a fire in his belly, Dick Durbin.
He does. So
Get
why?
you fired up.
So I've said that. So we have a tight labor market right now. And so, but when I travel, I have to stay in hotels all the time, and we don't get maid service anymore, and there's nobody working at the restaurants. No. You can't get a waitress at a restaurant inside the hotel, and they used to say, well, it's COVID. Wait, what? So that doesn't make any sense. And, my friend Joe Bartnick has that great joke. He says, they say Mexicans are coming here to take our job. Well, where the hell are they? Right? Why don't we have... And so so what they're doing, why they want this open border, one of the big reasons is because the billionaire class wants to suppress the wages of Americans. And that's a fact. And I'm totally on board with that right now. And if you say that, Bernie Sanders used to say that, and then he got his mind right. As soon as whoever threatened him with the prosecution of his wife is what I guess is that why he turned into such a cuck to power.
I agree with that.
They threatened to prosecute his wife. So now he'll do whatever the FBI tells him to. And that's what he's doing. And so he used to say that about the reason why the open borders are open is because the Koch brothers want it that way. And now he's not allowed to say that.
You saw the Australian guy, right? That said the people they got to hurt more out there. No, real estate guy made all the news, but
I did.
Same thing they all think.
Yes, and so now now Dick Durbin he just gave the game away. They want him for the open borders because nobody's joining the military anymore. So we got to have foreigners fill our military, which is, you pointed out, is the worst thing you can have. And then he said we got to have them because nobody's working in our medical hospitals. And now there's the third one.
Keep those hospitals open, and they're desperate to find new personnel. We need legal immigration for that. The same holds true when it comes to agricultural workers.
Yeah,
in our state of Illinois, we desperately need them for virtually every aspect of farming and agriculture. Are they available and ready to come? Yes, but they need a change in the immigration law to reach that. The point I'm trying to make is
that you're a tool of the billionaire class, and you want to suppress wages in America and fill our country with foreigners to take jobs that Americans would fill if they were paid a decent wage. And he went from doctors and nurses and medical technicians to farm workers and agricultural workers and the military. So we don't have enough people, and everybody I know is looking for a good job in America, except they don't want to provide a good job. They want to keep people who are on edge.
No.
And they want to keep everybody, so we can beg for an authoritarian rule, so somebody will come in and protect us from. And
exactly.
In the meantime, they want us to hate our neighbor. They want me to think that my neighbor is the problem. My neighbor is the fascist. My neighbor is the white supremacist. My neighbor is the Nazi. Instead of who is the real Nazi, the people who are pulling the strings of Dick Durbin right there, and Dick Durbin, and the people who populate the halls of Congress and the White House. They're the enemy of the people and the people in corporate news. Everybody at Fox News, NBC, CNN, the Washington Post, New York Times, those are the enemies of the people because they're not going to tell you the truth. They're going to call you a racist if you point this stuff out, and they'll do it on the regular. And that's what the professional managerial class is there to do, is there to police speech and make sure you don't tell a truth that you're not supposed to tell. So now I know the game that's actually happening. Now I know why they had to demonize you as a racist, because you were actually warning the country of what was actually happening and what's going on and how they're undermining our entire society right now. They could fix homelessness and they won't on purpose.
Yes.
They could have a closed border and they won't on purpose. They could end these wars and invest that money back here and they won't on purpose. They won't give people health care on purpose because it keeps you on edge. They won't give you a living wage or an affordable college tuition because it keeps people on edge. I'll throw it to you and you can say whatever you want.
Well, I would just make of course I agree with every word of that, but I would just raise one other possibility, which is the economy, which is, it's an election year. So it's possible now, because everything is centralized and everything emanates from the Fed, everything's about interest rates. It's possible to kind of hold markets up for a period. You're straining under the weight, but you can do it to November. That is their plan, okay? And then after that, they'll think of something else. But their short-term plan is to keep economic collapse at bay until the election. They're really, really trying hard. And they may be able to pull it off, but let's say they don't. Or let's say after the election. At some point, there's going to be a massive economic reset in this country. Massive. Okay, we're long overdue for one. A lot of our economy is fake. When that happens, what are the effects? That happened in 1929. It was a pretty cohesive country at the time. Pretty cohesive, actually, by current standards, incredibly cohesive. And the country made it through. And there was, rocky moments, and we can debate them. But America didn't fall apart. If you had that now, where the country has been, no one in the country has anything in common with anyone else. Neighbors hate each other to the extent they even know each other. And then you have tens of millions of new people who no one knows. All of a sudden, you've got an incredibly volatile mix. And the question is, what happens then? And I think shit could get real at that point. And, you can't even predict what's going to happen then. But what you can say for certain is that you can't really know. And I think that we overstate their, meaning the people who make these decisions, our political class, the Washington, they're not smart. They're not good at running stuff. And I don't think they have a plan for that. And I think we could have massive, massive internal turmoil in the United States. And I'm definitely concerned about that.
And so the establishment, because of social media, because of shows like yours and Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald, it's losing control of the narrative. And when they lose control of the narrative, that's when they have to freeze your bank account. And that's when they have to start disappearing people. And that's when they have to start killing people like they're doing to Julian Assange. And they're doing it. And here's Al Gore, the ultimate servant of the establishment and the billionaire class. He's going to tell you that we need to get our news from the billionaire class. Listen to this.
To one based on broadcasting and then moving on to the internet and to social media has disrupted the balances that used to exist that made representative democracy work much better. Because a free self-governing people rely on a shared base of knowledge that serves as a basis for reasoning together collectively. But if you have social media that is dominated by algorithms that pull people down these rabbit holes that are a bit like pitcher plants, these algorithms, they are the digital equivalent of AR-15s. They ought to be banned. They really ought to be banned. It's an abuse of the public forum. But when people are pulled down these rabbit holes, you know what's at the bottom of the rabbit hole? That's where the echo chamber is.
They go full circle.
And if you spend too much time in the echo chamber, what's weaponized is another form of AI, not artificial intelligence, artificial insanity. I'm serious.
He's serious. So the guy who told us that we were going to be all swimming with polar bears 4 years ago thinks that we need to go along with the next line of bullshit that's coming from MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, and the Washington Post. What we need to do is rein in Al Gore's rhythm. Right now, he's more annoying than the neighborhood's kid with a new drum set. Am I right?
Doomsday cults have better prediction records.
Yeah.
Well, the world's going to end. I got it one time from the thing I was in. He said it probably 5 times in my lifetime.
He said we wouldn't have polar ice caps by 10 years ago. We'd be living in water worlds. And this guy and the people who were debunking him, he wants them banned. So this guy, that's what's actually dangerous. He's against people getting their information from anywhere else except the billionaire-controlled corporate media. Doesn't that scare you?
Well, it's horrifying. And the guy, I think, still has this Google board seat. So what does that tell you? I mean, he's speaking, and he became very rich from unearned Google shares that he received. So to some extent, he's speaking on behalf of the largest company in the world when he says anything. Right, he's Tony Blair. And by the way, we don't even have time to get into it, but is there anyone more loathsome than Tony Blair and more hollowed out as a person? He's a husk. He's no, maybe Bloomberg. Bloomberg has a little bit of fire in him that makes you think there's some humanity there, but Tony Blair is just like, he's been turned out in the prison yard. He's just a bitch to global finance to the point where he has like no independent capacity for thinking at all. But Gore, yeah, of course, Gore is a fascist. Gore's also kind of dumb. I know Al Gore. And he's always been kind of dumb. He speaks entirely in cliches. Oh, the rabbit hole leading to the echo chamber. I mean, his brain isn't capable of word formations that haven't been created for him. Like he's kind of a
well, how do you invent the internet?
But his instincts are always authoritarian. Like he's one of the reasons that, cigarette smoking is, and looking back, like cigarette smoking is bad for you. Got it. But compared to where we are now, like if we could take, 6 points off the suicide rate, maybe it'd be better to go back to cigarette smoking. Like a lot has gotten worse since then, but whatever. He was one of the driving forces behind banning that. He's the driving force behind banning everything. Do you remember rock music? I mean, he's just a default, let's ban it guy because he's weak inside and it makes him feel strong.
And this fight against independent news. I mean, look what CNN did to Joe Rogan, right? They colored his skin green.
Oh yeah,
when he got COVID
that
and
was
beat
debunked, Jimmy.
in 48 years. And then Bill Gates funds a bullshit fact-checking organization that says CNN didn't color his skin green. So the last and final command was to not trust the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final and most essential command, and that's exactly what's going on. Facebook fact-checking. Could there be a bigger joke? And it's all funded by Bill Gates or the Rockefeller Foundation or the Annenberg Foundation. It's always funded by that kind of, if you look into any of the, and of course the guy who used to run, or the guy who runs Snopes got caught plagiarizing. Of course he's a plagiarist and a big liar. And so all these people who are fact checking and all this stuff, and you can't go down the rabbit hole. My show has never lied to you, right? As far as I can tell, since they took your advertisers away, you've been doing the best work in news journalism around. And what Julian Assange also, you don't get in trouble for lying. You get in trouble for telling the truth. And so you got in trouble for telling the truth. I've gotten strikes for telling the truth. Russell Brand's in trouble for telling the truth. Julian Assange is being murdered, right? And as Jen Psaki goes on a weekly basis and tries to scare you that somehow if Donald Trump becomes president again, he's going to prosecute journalists. At the time, she worked for an organization, an administration that is prosecuting the most decorated journalist of our lifetime. So take it wherever you want.
Well, I would just say these people have, I mean, as you noted earlier, whatever they're doing, they accuse you of doing. It's more than a tactic. It's a psychological syndrome. I do think, not to play shrink, I noticed we banned Sigmund Freud in the last 20 years, and maybe there's a reason for that, because you're not supposed to look too deeply at motive anymore, and I wonder why. But it is a syndrome. It's a psychological syndrome where, like, a normal person would be incapable of accusing someone else of doing exactly what he himself is doing. Like, that's insane. Right. You'd be a crazy person to do that. But they do it at every single turn. And in fact, they do it so consistently, it's the only reliable gauge of what they're actually doing. So as soon as they started yelping about democracy, I'm such a literal dumb person. I'm like, democracy? Why are they talking about democracy? What does that have to do with democracy? And then I realized, of course, that's the thing they hate. So they are posing as its lone defenders. Of course, I mean, it's just go down the list, whatever they're calling you. I never really think anyone's a racist, but they've called me a racist so many times. I would love to get their search histories because I bet they're racist. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just it's just super interesting. So, you know, I'm worried about the next year. I really am, and I think I have cause to worry about it. It feels like. And I hope I'm wrong. I've certainly been wrong a lot. I don't lie if I can help it, but I have been wrong. And I hope I am once again wrong when I predict that this will be a very different country in December of 2024. It feels that way. It feels like we're on the brink. Like they've taken the mask off. They're not hiding who they are anymore. They're not trying to convince you anymore. They're not pretending it's for your own good. They don't care about your own good, and they're not saying they do. And so when you reach that stage, like what's next? Not good things at all. They're not even pretending to rule by consensus. They're ruling by force. When you give up argument, you get to force. That's, you know, there's nothing left. And so I think we're going to see a lot of force in the next 12 months. And again, I sincerely hope that I'm just being crazy, but I'm not.
Are you shocked as I am that, so I was always proud to be a comedian because comedians never went along with the status quo. We always poked hole in the status quo. We always questioned authority. We never followed rules, except when it came to COVID. Almost every comedian I know fell in line lockstep. I saw comedian after comedian get on stage in Los Angeles and shame the audience for trying to get informed about an experimental medical treatment that they're being forced to take. They used that phrase. It was called, please don't do your own research. You know, before COVID, that was just called reading.
They fell in line way before that, by the way.
And so now they've literally shamed people for reading. You wouldn't do that with any other subject. Anyway, so are you as shocked as me as how easy my old friends became Nazis during COVID? And that is not a stretch. They became brown shirts and they were enforcers. And if you stepped out of line, they were going to call on you. And I know people who weren't allowed, their own families turned on them. They wouldn't allow them to come home for Christmas or birthdays. But so are you shocked at how easy people go along? And it seems like the majority of people go along with it in this country.
Well, the overwhelming majority do. And you know, comedians are not your average person. I mean, they're professional nonconformists. The whole point of being a comedian is you have special license to give the finger to anyone you want. And the people you should be giving the finger to are the ones that none of the rest of us can. That's my read on comedy anyway. It really is a special category of nonconformity. So if they're going along with it, then it tells you whatever's going on here is really deep. And again, I just refer back to the observation about human nature. The need to belong is an overwhelming need. And you have to be kind of a freak not to feel that. And so I would flip it around. No, at this point, I'm not shocked. I've been so gravely disappointed by so many people, many of whom are friends of mine, and I just feel sad about it. I was talking to one tonight who I still love, but like part of me, I just can't help but think, God, you just debased yourself. You have no dignity. You're not a man anymore. I mean, I really feel that way. But I flip it around and think of all the people I have met in the last 3 years well, you're one of them. And I can think of a bunch of others, Russell Brand's another, who, like, I never would have imagined. Like, you couldn't have predicted who the people were who were just like, no, I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to tell the truth. Period. I'm going to tell the truth. I don't care what you do to me. I'm telling the truth. And there was a percentage of people who decided that. And I just think they're wonderful people. They're the best people I've ever met in my whole life. I really mean that. Like, I have probably a lot fewer friends than I once did, but I respect them much more. I learn much more from them. I'm in awe of some of them, their bravery and their integrity. I mean, I never had friends like that. Naomi Wolf, like, who would have guessed Naomi Wolf? I would speak for myself. I've never been a liberal, so I would like make fun of Naomi Wolf. And then Naomi Wolf like decided, whether you agree with her or not, she's like, I'm not ever telling a lie, and I don't care what you do to me. And I just never would have predicted Naomi Wolf would be one of those people. Like, where did that come from? Who knows? But how cool is that?
I'm with you. I would have never expected that you and I would be friends with each other, and that you and I would be on the same page.
I agree.
I used to be a like Jon Stewart, and then I just woke up and soon as I looked into anything, like when I got vaccine injured and I looked into it, I found out they were lying about everything. They were lying about masks. They were lying about where the virus came from. They were lying about herd immunity. They were lying about natural immunity. They were lying about transmission and contraction, and they were lying about lying. And it's just, and still, my friends in Hollywood will just pretend that didn't happen.
Everything's reefer madness. They have one mode.
And I know I'm supposed to let you go right now. Do you have to go right now?
I gotta go. I'm doing Twitter Spaces for X Spaces for the first time.
Oh, okay. And we don't call it Twitter.
You dead named X.
You dead named it. It's called X now, but
I know I'm dead named X. Shit.
Kurt is not. I'm not calling it X. I'm still calling it Twitter. Kurt, what do you say?
Oh, I say Malcolm Twitter and the Twitter phone if somebody has a xylophone. I won't acknowledge X and other things. That's how dead namey I am.
That's how dead namey we are. Okay, Tucker Carlson. Everybody check out his new news network and become a subscriber. It's the only thing that can save this country is if we get information that doesn't come from the billionaire-controlled media and the liars on corporate news or the. That's it. That's the only thing. And we need an actual revolution. And I've been saying this for a while. We need Bernie Sanders used to start every speech in 2016. Sounds like you're ready for a revolution. Well, he dropped that. And he doesn't want one. And if nobody's going to lead it, I'll lead it. I think we need a revolution. And I know you'll be there to support us. Tucker Carlson, thanks so much for coming on, pal.
Amen.
We're doing live comedy shows in Oxnard, California, Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Michigan, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Boston. Plus, we're going to put a date in Edmonton, Canada, plus Vancouver. See ya. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.